from how art functioned as soft power, where you can see this at work, say, in the Olympics opening ceremonies and things like the Goethe Institute and so on, and how art functions as in terms of cultural capital in contemporary Asia, especially in terms of these global cities like Singapore and Hong Kong. So the way that art functions now is primarily as a means to attract creative talent, the so-called creative class, in order to so that they'll come to live in these cities because they attract global capital. So art functions in attracting them to come, but also functions in helping to nurture them and cultivate their creativity.
Now, is art in the form of communicating politics, and is it okay for societies, to promote art, in the form of politics?
Well, art doesn't well, no. What interested me was not really the content of the art, in other words, the political message or the theme of the work of art. What interested me was the fact that art itself was being produced and its production was being encouraged, but also its collection was being encouraged, because it's not only about promoting the local arts. The main point that I wanted to make is, in fact, that the emphasis is not so much on promoting the local arts, but on buying and collecting art that is of global significance from overseas, right? So the setting up of galleries in the Gilman Barracks, for instance, or these high-profile purchases by the Qatar Museum Authority, right? So they bought a Cézanne, they bought a Roscoe. When Edvard Munch's very famous Scream, the painting The Scream, was being auctioned, I think, at Christie's early on in the year, the rumor was that the Qatar royal family was one of the people who were interested in bidding for it. So it's buying these high-profile works of art in order to say that you're an art hub or a center for artistic capital, right? So the focus is more on that than on promoting local arts. In any case, it's not about the content of the works of art. It's about how the works of art are being presented, what are the aims of presenting the works of art in this way, and so on. And the main aim is to attract human capital, the so-called creative class, and to provide a stimulating environment that will encourage them to stay and that will nurture the creative class locally also.
So that's what we're going to see in the next coming 5 years?
I would think that the trend is going to be continuing.
And what do you see in Hong Kong today?
What do I see in Hong Kong? The Hong Kong situation is that primarily Hong Kong is very worried. On the one hand, it's very ambitious because it wants to displace Tokyo as the global city of Asia. Right? I don't know whether you know Saskia Sarsen's very famous book, The Global City. Sarsen makes the argument that there are in fact 3 global cities in the world. Top-tier global cities, New York, London, and Tokyo, and they're the centers of international finance and so on. But then there are other global cities that are second-tier. Okay, so Hong Kong is one of these second-tier global cities, but it wants to try to displace Tokyo as the premier global city. So you see these ads by the Hong Kong Tourist Board about Hong Kong, Asia's world city, and so on. But the argument, but since global cities are a competitive phenomena, at the same time that it's trying to displace Tokyo as a global city, it's also worried that its position is being challenged by Shanghai and also Singapore. So it has this very ambitious project of building this entirely new cultural district called the West Kowloon Cultural District, right? And one of the major things that has happened in June 2012 was that there's a very famous Swiss industrialist called Uli Zick, who was also the former Swiss ambassador to China, who has amassed probably the most important collection of contemporary Chinese art in the world. And he donated many of his pieces to this new museum that has yet to be built, called the M Plus Museum. The M Plus Museum is going to be in the West Kowloon Cultural District. It's being run by the founding curator of the Tate Modern in London. So this is a major deal. So that's where Hong Kong is headed. But Hong Kong is interested in doing this because solely in order to build up its cultural capital, in order to attract talent and to be a global city.
Now, how could Asian cities in this region, be able to collaborate one another and rather than competing each other? Is that possible?
I don't think it's possible in the sense that, by definition, a global city, particularly a second-tier global city, depends on competition, because you are a global city only in relation to other global cities. In relation to other cities that are less global than you, right? Because the major idea is that you want to be able to attract all these kinds of high value added production to your city. And if they come to your city, they're not going to go to another city.
So it becomes exclusive then in the future?
Well, the exclusivity can be shared because there are a few global cities. But obviously, if, say, PricewaterhouseCoopers is going to make its major center in the region, it's going to be based in Hong Kong as opposed to Singapore, then it's because they can't be based in both, they can't have a major office in both locations. They might have a branch office in one location. But the competition is to be the place, be the city where the major the main regional office is going to be.
Now, by definition, what is art to the people in Hong Kong?
In general, well, I'm really not a specialist on Hong Kong. So, and I'm also not an art historian by training. This one you will actually, to answer the question carefully, one would have to do ethnographic work, to ask, local Hong Kong inhabitants what counts as art. In general, art, or fine art, to be more precise, is a European invention. It's a European concept. It came out, it arose, it emerged, is through European intellectual history, but gained special traction in the age of the rise of philosophical aesthetics in the late 18th, early 19th century. So, the fine art then referred to a kind of production, a kind of object, or a kind of way of looking at things that was autonomous. Right? So if you think about the disinterestedness of judgments of taste, that judgments of taste are disinterested, right? Or in Hegel, if you think about judgments, if you think about the work of art as the embodiment of the absolute or the infinite in a sensuous material form, right? So they have a higher or a transcendent quality to them. So this is what fine art is. Now this is what the philosophical definition of fine art is. And that's basically the notion of art that is adopted by curators in museums, right?
Are you confident that these rethinking of the Asian century with the arts will be the Asian century?
I don't get your question.
Do you think that the Asian century with the arts, which the roundtable that has just concluded yesterday, do you think that this is the century which Asians will arise and perform and outdo the Western counterparts?
As I said in my paper, I don't think so. Because first of all, the focus is not really the focus of this interest in the arts is not really in the production of local art, but in terms of the collection of globally significant works of art. So as far as production is concerned, local production in Asian countries, of course, this is going to increase with the economic rise of Asia, right? But whether or not Asian art will be able to outdo European art or American art, it really depends on a case-by-case basis. You'd have to look at the production of art in different countries to be able to say that. I mean, the point that I wanted to make, the point that I made in my paper, is that in fact the notion of fine art is a Western invention. So the standards of what counts as art are also Western standards. So the production of art in places like Asia will, in the initial phase, involve some kind of acculturation into these Western aesthetic standards, right? Let me give you an example. If you think about Chinese culture, right? Do you speak Chinese?
Oh, yes.
Well, I'll say it in Cantonese. So if you, what is considered as so-called art? So, in classical Chinese culture, kam kei siwa, right? So chess is a kind of art. Chinese chess would be a kind of art. But that doesn't make sense in the Western schema. People don't think of your skill in playing chess as a kind of art, right? So obviously the notions of what counts as art, what can be exhibited in a museum, sold in a gallery, if you don't think about antiquities, if you think about contemporary art, what counts as art is of course subject to these Western standards of what counts as aesthetic. So the standards of taste are also the same way. The forms that count as art are also Western standards. So in order for people in Asia to produce art, right, they have to first cultivate themselves. They have to learn about these standards of art. So in the initial phase, there will be some kind of imitation involved, right? Of course, subsequently, people will say, oh, there is a process of hybridization, or there is even a process of conscious subversion of these Western aesthetic standards. But my main point is the notion of fine art, even the institution of a museum, is a Western. The museum is a Western institution. So in order for these things to qualify as fine arts, it really depends on some kind of acculturation. So if, for instance, if you look at the Taiwanese artist whose work is Cai Jiawei, who is being exhibited in the Louis Vuitton gallery at the Marina Bay Sands. She's Taiwanese, right? But she was trained, if I remember rightly, she was trained in the Rhode Island School of Design, right, in America. She has exhibited in places like Paris, San Francisco, and so on, right? So people here probably heard of her because she had exhibited in the West, right? So in a sense, this still remains the kind of center or the source of these norms about what counts as art. So in that sense, no, I think it's highly unlikely that these kinds of local productions will kind of out